This is a Renegade Media Network podcast.
Finally, the best time of the year has arrived. That would be football season. Don't roll your eyes. You got to quit focusing on the day in and day out craziness that we all focus on. Let your mind relax a little bit. If you love playing fantasy football but struggle to find maybe, the right resource to help you with your research, maybe you keep losing every season, well, I've got you covered. And by that, I mean my sponsors over at Football Insider Edge have you covered. Whether you're a season-long player focused on DraftKings or maybe FanDuel type contests, or if you just like to make the occasional wager each week on a couple of games, make a couple of dollars, the guys at Football Insider Edge provide you with the research tools and the in-depth analysis to take your game to the next level. With their proprietary model, matchup charts, and industry award-winning content, the team at Football Insider Edge have devoted themselves to educating their subscribers, how about that, helping them improve their play, and in a few special moments, which I would like to arrive at one of these moments, winning life-changing money. They are proud of the community they've built through weekly interaction on their Slack chat channel, and take great pride in helping others to achieve their goals of becoming better fantasy players. Check this out. As supporters of this show, which they are, and I guess you could say the Liberty Movement as a whole, these guys are that, they are currently offering a 20% discount on any monthly or full season plan on their website. So, of course, to get that 20% off, you need to type in Counterflow. That is your promo code that I'm giving you guys to get this 20% off over at footballinsideredge.com. Once again, footballinsideredge.com, promo code Counterflow. Do it at checkout. Take advantage of the discount offer today. Let's get to the show.
You are now listening to the Counterflow Podcast, a place for dissonant voices and unapproved opinions.
You get split in fucking half, the icon, the hologram graph, but I am the center inside the placenta of math. You clash with cyanide gas and die fast. Rhythmical equivalent of solids, liquid and gas. We smash your sinus with the power of Lord Titus, but I am the virus inside of the iris of Cyrus.
Here is your host and humble narrator, Buck Johnson.
Well, now, here we go. I'm giving you guys a bonus episode. This is not just one of the episodes that drops every Monday weekly into your podcatcher. This is a bonus episode, and I'm so excited about it because I was sitting there one night and it kind of hit me that there's a lot of black-pilled people out there right now in our circles, a lot of people feeling pessimistic about the way things are going, and that's quite understandable because you've got this hanging threat of vaccine passports over our heads, vaccine passports to get in anywhere and everywhere. You start thinking about financial institutions and the control they have over a lot of the stuff we do. And it seems like there's a lot of societal pressure on those of us who might not fit in to the category that everyone else fits into. We just want to live our life and be free. And yet there's a lot of societal pressure kind of putting the squeeze on us here lately. And that can be a feeling. And I know a lot of you guys feel like, you're kind of all alone in this world of clowns out there, but you're not, because a lot of us feel the way you do. So I wanted to bring people like my guests today onto this show so we can kind of talk through some of this, because it is for you guys, but, in all honesty, it's kind of therapeutic for me as well. And I think you'll find this helpful, as I did. It's funny, I'm starting to think when I was, going over all of this in my head, who should I bring on to talk about this? And boom, two people popped into my mind immediately. My pal Pete Quiñones and Jason Stapleton. And they are both here with me. I'm sure most of you know who both of them are. Really quickly here, in case you don't, Peter Quiñones is host of the Freeman Beyond the Wall podcast. Excellent podcast. I highly recommend it. And he writes over at the Substack with my favorite name of all the Substacks I read, By Any Means Necessary. So check all of Pete's work out. We get into that at the end, all the links you can go to, of course. And for the first time, Jason Stapleton is on the show. He is the host of the Wealth, Power, and Influence podcast. He's the creator of the Nomad Network, which we get quite a bit into in this show, and I think you'll find it really interesting. So there's their intro. Let's just bring them on right now. Pete Quiñones, Jason Stapleton. Welcome to the show, you guys. I'm thankful that you're both here. How are you?
Thanks so much, man. I really appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, this is cool. Pete, my audience knows you because you've been on the show multiple times. We've done some live streams a few times as well. And Jason, it's your first time on the show, but although I suspect a lot of my audience is aware of who you are, I do have to say, you've probably heard this often. You were one of the first ones that kind of inspired me to do podcasting because I used to listen to your show when it was kind of brand new, but way before the Matt Erickson days. And I kind of got inspired. And then you said one time, this Rodecaster mixer is really the way to go. And that's what you were using, at least at the time. And I caught it briefly. Then I started doing the research and I couldn't remember what you said. And I emailed you. And I thought, he's not going to write back. And within like 5 minutes, you wrote back and raved about the Rodecaster mixer.
Don't tell anybody that I email back because then everybody's going to expect a response from me. I don't remember. I actually don't remember that. You must have just caught me when I happened to be looking at my mail. But no, I still think it's great. I use a little smaller setup now, so I'm more mobile. It's a little hard to haul around, but I think if you've got a setup location, it's the best thing you could buy.
Yes, I love it. And my producer seems to love it too. I've done a show or two, I think, where I just used the Zoom or something that he was not as happy with that. Pete, good to have you back, man.
Always good to talk to you, man.
Yeah.
We've hung out, twice in real life now?
Yeah, it's weird. Like internet friends have met up in real life. Imagine that. I wanted to do this episode. It hit me. Usually I try to get in either with live streams or something that's extremely topical for the moment. But I was looking at my schedule for August and it's kind of topical, but there's some academic stuff. And the other night I was drinking and just kind of hit me that a lot of people in our little space, at least, seem black-pilled as of late and pessimistic on a lot of things. Between mask mandates, everything's ramping up again is why it feels like for a little bit we were kind of out of the mess, it seemed like for a second, and maybe we spoke too soon, and now things are ramping back up. It seems like the vaccine passport's an issue, mask mandates, people are starting to face, unfortunately, it looks like a hard reality that maybe I won't be with my job anymore. And one of my listeners actually said that he lost a significant other over things that were illuminated over the past year because of all of this kind of stuff, which is crazy to think, but that's probably not really uncommon. People are afraid that banks are going to freeze their accounts if they're in this, maybe the non-vaxxed camp or the non-compliant camp or stuff like that. There's all these things you start to think about. And sometimes, like Pete and I were discussing before we hit record, sometimes you look at social media and you could imagine some of these things happening. Some of the normal people are like, well, yeah, I'm all for that. And we're sitting here like, Jesus Christ, I'm a human being trying to live my life and I'm not hurting anyone. Why are you guys trying to shut me out of life? And so the reason I got both of you on, Pete, you're very good at being who you are on your show, unafraid to admit if you've made mistakes. Sometimes you're really pissed off. Sometimes you're really happy. And you kind of have a good feel, it seems like, to where like your listeners are and kind of the mood of the moment. You're very good at that. Jason, obviously you're very good at inspiring people to be better, to get past being black-pilled, to understand the steps to take to kind of be free and try to create their own reality in a sense and maybe break out of this matrix. There seems like Pete and I are sometimes talking to people on our shows saying, what do we do next? And then I'll listen to Jason and he's already talking about what to do next. And so that's kind of, I thought it would be a unique mix to get y'all's opinions for this kind of stuff. And so Jason, I'll start with you. How would you kind of survey everything, where we're at right now, the current climate on how things are going and kind of the mood it gives you generally?
Well, I don't think it's going well. If you look at just trajectory of what we all concern ourselves with, which is liberty and personal autonomy, I think that's being squashed. And I think that there is a constant and steady pressure to restrict liberty and to control the masses as best they can and desensitize people to the sort of controls that we've now become accustomed to. It is becoming now okay for you to say you can't. We use nomenclature like passports when that's not what this is, and vaccines when that's not what they are. And so we muddy language and we desensitize people to those control tactics. And I think that that's very bad. On the flip side of that, I think that there are a large group of people who really who don't want that. Then the problem is, and they don't know what to do. Like they don't have any agency. They don't have any status. They can't really affect their government or their surroundings. And so they're left kind of throwing their hands in the air saying, well, what are we supposed to do? And I prefer to, in the midst of all of the negative, to see the world that we're in now as a time of opportunity. It's a time of fracturing. It's a time of conflict. It's a time of, it's been until recently, war, a lot of it. But in the midst of that, we're in the process of huge economic and cultural transition, one that is going to present massive opportunities for anybody who wants to take the time to find them. And I think we as liberty-minded people oftentimes put ourselves into a position where we just like to sit around and complain about everything that's wrong and point the fingers at all the people who are restricting us and holding us back, when I think we probably do far more damage to ourselves than anybody else does to us. And I know it's kind of a hard pill for some people to swallow, but I really believe that. I think you can still, this is still one of the greatest times on planet Earth in history for us to be alive. Prior to the American Revolution, every country was a dictatorship. They all were. For the first time in human history, we can now both seek our own personal satisfaction in the work that we do, so self-actualization. And secondly, for the very first time in history, you can get rich helping other people get what they want. That's a brand new thing. Walter Williams, I think, was the first person to say that. And I just think it's amazing. And I choose to be optimistic rather than pessimistic, because being pessimistic doesn't help me. It's not advantageous. So I promote that. I try and inspire people to that. And, but it doesn't change the fact that things are ugly right now. They really are.
Pete, where do you kind of see things as they are?
While Jason was talking, it occurred to me that through building your own way, like, I'm not saying off the grid, but outside of the system, doing agorism or things like building the next, what comes next, what replaces what's now, I mean, you can become very wealthy. And through what we have, the system we have now, which in many ways politically, I think Buck and I probably agree, because we've read Hoppe's Democracy, the God That Failed, that if we had a choice, we would probably be living in a monarchy compared to what we have now. But it's hard to deny the fact that in what we have now, you can actually build wealth. And right now, it's amazing that you can actually preserve wealth, even with the Federal Reserve doing what it does and has been doing for over 100 years now. You could take that and put it into cryptocurrency. You could take the dollars you're making and put it into gold and silver. And that is a preservation of wealth that people don't have in the past. I mean, really, if you think about the preservation of wealth in the past, the only thing you really have is land, property. And you would have to be a feudal lord in order to really have property, until we got to that time where people could buy themselves out through the monarchies doing things that monarchies do to bankrupt themselves. But I do see it as a white pill, meaning I can see that there are ways that we can become wealthy, and the more wealthy you are, the more free you are. I mean, Jason and I talked about this when we recorded recently, is that rich people just don't go to prison. And that's one of the things that libertarians talk about, is that they talk about, the prison system and everything like that. Well, it's poor people that go to prison. Yeah, poor Black people, we like to talk about that, but poor white people as well. I mean, prisons are not full of the rich and affluent. So, but we have the reality of a lot of people who are have jobs. They're tied to the system, and it looks more and more. I think yesterday, the Pentagon said that they were going to mandate vaccines. And then California, I think they said today, California school teachers, Newsom said that they're going to have to get vaccines. And unless you are outside of that system, if you're not in New York City right now, then it's easier to avoid a lot of this tyranny. And, let's just remind ourselves, this is 18 months. This is a year and a half. This is a blip in our lives. And everything has fundamentally changed when it comes to the culture. And I think I was talking with Lee Enfield the other day from N Block Press. And I said, Lee, in January of 2020, if I would have told you that we'd be praising and people would be using federalism as a weapon, as a way to survive, as a way to be more free than other people in the country, what would you have told me? And Lee was like, I would have thought you were insane. And that's exactly what we're doing. I mean, look at people are voting with their feet and going to Florida and Texas and places like that. It's not always a good thing because a lot of those people are going there for the wrong reasons. But I mean, I just see there's white pills and there's black pills, and one day I can be white pilled. I think that's why you had me on, Buck, is one day I can be white pilled, one day I can be black pilled. But the one thing that I've learned a lot and really needed to get through this thick skull, and it's from listening to Jason recently, is that, I mean, the more you have, the easier a lot of this can be, because that voting with your feet is a whole lot more easy if you have the money to do it, if you're not tied to the system. I mean, I just literally 2 days ago moved 10 hours away from where I was living to a small town where this stuff is basically is not touching it. And I was able to do that because my income comes from outside of the system now. And it's something that not everybody's going to be able to do it. Not everybody's going to be able to do it, but those who can, do it. And help
Jason,
other people too.
You are in the midst of doing that. Is that right, Jason Stapleton? I believe you are voting with your feet. I heard you say, I know it's a busy schedule. You're getting married in October, but before then you're trying to find a place in Arizona.
Yeah. We actually found a place. We're moving out at the end of this month in just a couple of weeks. And it was one of those things where I was in a position for a short period of time where I needed to be in California. And after the COVID hit, we were in the process of building out the studio that you're looking at now. And once that happened, now my fiance now, she now works remotely as well. And we said, let's get out of here. We don't need to be here anymore. I don't need this headache. And I think that here's the thing. I think Pete's exactly right. I think to discount all of the negative aspects of what we're going through right now and turning a blind eye to that is not a good idea. But I always look at it and I say, well, what are the things that I can control? Because if I can't control it, then there's no reason for me to sit around complaining about it and whining about it. That's idiot. That's madness. And I think that our little group, our community of liberty-minded people are uniquely positioned to capitalize on all this change that's happening, because we are the ones who largely are at the forefront of crypto, blockchain, decentralization. We are the ones who aren't tethered to the system and the old ways of doing things, the old banking systems, and the people in power today are tethered to those systems. They're forced to operate, and they're trying to save. It's kind of like cable TV, right? They tried to save it for years, and the fact is you can't. It's dying. Now they're trying to establish new fronts online with all of their different apps and things, and now you've got the YouTubes and the Facebooks, the Googles and the Facebooks who are trying to become kind of the new center of who gets to talk and who doesn't. But that's going to die away soon as well. We're starting our own app that you're not going to be able to do that. And pretty soon there's going to be decentralized communities online that you can't destroy and you can't silence because nobody owns them. You're going to have smart contracts that are going to handle most of the stuff that bankers and lawyers now handle automatically. These are amazing things that are coming around the corner. If you don't know about them, get off your ass and go figure it out, because it's there for the taking. And the worst thing that you can possibly do is spend the next 5 to 10 years sitting around complaining about the old system while an entire new world is being built up around you that you have no concept of. That's the quickest way to find yourself indebted and enslaved. As Matt talked about on our show today, it won't post till next Monday, but he said, this is the time. There may come a time in this country when there's too much that you can't overcome the hurdle of getting out on your own and doing it yourself. You still can right now. The worst thing that you can be doing is sitting around complaining rather than acting.
What I just to kind of get it to some of my audience now, why are you getting out of California, for one? I mean, I think we can kind of figure it out, but I just wanted to hear it in your words. And I have this feeling, and Pete touched upon it just a while ago. Sometimes I do get worried. I'm in Texas. I do get worried that the Californians that are moving here are the bad ones. And then I don't know, maybe the bad ones stay in California because they like people like Gavin Newsom running their lives. I can't figure this out. Why would you come to a state, not you, Jason, but why would a bad Californian come to Texas where it's governed by a Republican? I don't see that they have enough foresight to go, well, we just more of us keep doing it, it'll turn blue. I mean, on social media, they'll say things like that, but I don't know. I just don't know. In your experience, so why did you move out, or why are you moving out? And the Californians that are leaving your state, are they the good ones like you, or do you see the bad ones unable to figure out why it sucks there and still leaving?
Well, so that's a really good question. So first of all, I don't think that most of the people, so I think a lot of the people who are moving out are more progressive, and I'm assuming that that's what you mean by the bad ones, is that they're not predisposed to our way of thinking. And the ones who are moving out are the ones who have the financial means to do so, and who recognize that the benefits now are too great. So I'm moving out mainly because I'm in a high tax bracket, and I save a massive amount of money by moving out of the state just purely on taxes, not to mention cost of living. But above and beyond that, I really want to, my fiance and I really want to spend the years that follow traveling a lot, maybe establishing residency in Panama or somewhere like that. That's something that we really enjoy doing. I want my kids to be able to travel with us and to see the world and experience that, and to have more than just a flyover country sort of like experience to life. And one of the things that California does is that they say, if you decided to try and establish residency somewhere else directly from California, California will still claim that you owe them state taxes. So they think that they own you. And that's really the straw that broke the camel's back for me. Is it's like, listen, I maybe many of your listeners will probably turn their nose up at this, but if I had to pay really high taxes to live in a utopia, I don't think I'd mind. If I was paying really high taxes, but the roads were clean and it was beautiful, and the homeless weren't on every street corner, and the public services were just above anything that you could get anywhere else in the world or in the United States, I mean, I might consider staying. I actually love Southern California. It's beautiful out here. I'm 20 minutes from the beach, 2 hours from the mountains. I really love it here. It's just not, it's too much. You start adding it up, and then you realize, hey, the state thinks that they owe you. What really hit me was this year, I got a bill in the mail from the California government, from California State Tax Authority, said I owed them $43,000 in back taxes. And I said, that's absurd. There's no possible way that I've miscalculated that badly. So I sent it to my accountant. And essentially, they just claimed that I owed a bunch of taxes that I didn't. And then we finally got it whittled down to, they're like, no, you still owe $5,000 to us. And they are just bending me over a barrel for $5,000. And I'm talking to my attorney. He's like, well, maybe it's just time we pay him off. I'm like, no, we're not going to do that. We don't owe him the money, and I'm not going to pay him the money. And so we think we now have got it down to $0, but I'll find out here shortly. But they're militant. And they don't have phone numbers or fax machines, at all. So if I want to try and contact them, the only way to do it is through direct mail. They only keep people staffed a few months out of the year. You look at this, it's just like, it's not just high taxation. They think that they own you, and I won't be owned. And so that's why we're leaving. But to your broader question about who's moving, I don't think that I don't think people know enough about economics and politics and what drives economies and builds people up and raises people out of poverty. There's very few people who understand that, really. Even most of the libertarians I talk to have a very shallow understanding of how it really works. And the people who are moving out are doing so for their own self-interest. And what they're going to do is they're going to try and establish the same sort of crap government that they live in now. They're going to try and establish it somewhere else. It's the same thing when you had people from the Middle East moving here years ago, right? And they're all moving to the country and they're trying to establish Sharia law. It's like, listen, if you wanted Sharia law, there's about half a dozen countries that you can go to that are absolute dumps if that's the way you want to live. We don't live that way because we don't want to live like you. And that doesn't process that way to them. And so I think it's kind of futile. They're probably, most of them are the bad ones, as you say, but they are moving for self-interested reasons. They don't like having to wear masks. They don't like having to be shackled like we have been here, the high taxes and the high cost of living. So they're voting with their feet. They're just doing it for different reasons than we are.
This touched upon something I've been talking about too. I used to be under this naive impression, I guess maybe before 2020, that most people, or a lot of people, are libertarians and they just don't know it. And so if I could get messaging out there, and that's actually kind of why I started this show years ago, really, I know it sounds naive now, but if enough people start to hear this message, their inner lust for liberty will be unveiled and they'll kind of throw off their shackles. And I don't believe that anymore. And 2020 was a punch in the gut in that regard to me, because it's obvious, and the H.O. Mencken quote's been thrown around a lot, but because it's true that I think the majority of people really don't like our ideas. I think they'd rather be safe and secure and keep our ideas into the weird abstract space that it kind of tends to float in already. I just wanted to get y'all's thoughts on that, because this is the kind of stuff I've been thinking about. And Jason, just, you made another good point. Of course, these people moving here aren't thinking in these terms of, well, I didn't like the way the economy was in California, I bet it would be great. They're not thinking these things. Where do you guys fall, Pete, on this thing, this naive notion I used to have, that if enough people just hear our brilliant messaging, that they will be libertarians?
So say that happens. Okay, so say we, in the next 3 or 4 years, 10 million people become libertarians. Okay, now what?
Right.
What's the move? I mean, the non-aggression principle precludes you from becoming politicians and doing what politicians have to do in order to gain power. So what's the move? I mean, local politics, I forget who said it, all politics is local, and it really is. I mean, if you want to, I know so many people who have moved their local town, their local government, and gotten taxes taken away, gotten improved schools, done stuff like that. I just said public schools. Geez, I'm not a libertarian. I'm not a real libertarian. I'm sorry, I'm living in reality. It seems to me that if you bring, and that was the problem with the Ron Paul revolution, is you had all these people, myself included, who became libertarians, but then for the next, that was 2007. It took me until March of last year to actually be able to see the real world and not, I read, one of the first books I read was For a New Liberty, where Murray Rothbard says, this is what Ancapistan is going to look like. And then I lived that in my head until February of last year, when I took a gut punch and I went, oh, wait a minute, they want to kill us. It's like, I don't know what's coming next. So what do I do? When I look back on 2007, 2012, all these people became libertarians. I assume they started reading some libertarian. Where are they? What are they doing? Are they on Twitter just shit posting like most? I mean, I still do it every once in a while. I do it for a purpose now, though. I don't do it just to feel better. I'm trying to elicit a response. I'm trying to maybe attract people that are like-minded. But what do? What if 10 million people decide to join the Libertarian Party in the next 3 years? What's the plan?
Mm-hmm.
What is the plan? And I think that is what, when Matt talks about that, people get pissed because I think they believe that if 10 million people became libertarians, Ancapistan would just like magically appear. Well, what's the plan? I mean, when you say, okay, well, maybe we take over a town. I wrote an article on how do you take over your local town? You look for a local town where the executive, the mayor, has all the power, can fire the sheriff, can fire everybody. You get elected anyway, by hook or by crook, and then you fire everybody and you bring everybody in who's libertarian, and then you just start peeling things away. I was like, okay, I just wrote that one day because I'm like, I don't know that anyone's written anything like this recently. And the response I got was, well, that violates the non-aggression principle. Okay, so if anything you do politically violates the non-aggression principle, what is the path forward? And that's why I naturally gravitate towards people like Jason, who is talking about building and talking about building what's next and things outside of the system. But I also gravitate towards the Hoppians who are like, well, all politics is local. If you're going to do anything local, you have to be political locally. And that is just, I mean, maybe that won't work, but it may buy some time for liberty in the meantime. I mean, something that to keep people out of jail, to keep our people from, worst case scenario, being lined up against a wall by a bunch of people who think that anyone who doesn't get the vaccine wants to kill them. I mean, it's like, what is the plan? Yeah. If you get 10 million people to believe what you believe.
Just real quick, Jason, just thinking this as Pete's talking, him and I have been in groupings, it's being termed as post-libertarians, and Matt Erickson's involved in some of this discussion as well. And boy, we have gotten a shitload of hate directed our way, to say the least, and by some friends, to be quite honest. And it's as I'm looking at you, Jason, and hearing Pete talk, it hits me like I feel sometimes like Jason was way ahead of us on all of this stuff, on getting out of this like silly bubble and discussing abstract ideas and living it in our mind. And meanwhile, you've been building and building, because I do know at first when you did this transition, you probably took a lot of slings and arrows your direction. And
from me, probably.
And lost.
Well, yeah, from a lot of people. I don't listen. The thing about me is that, like, I've been online for a lot of years in business, and I don't know that stuff rolls off my back, and I don't bear any grudges to anybody, and that's just always the way I've been since the beginning. I'm not a hater, but it's. This is what I will say is that I don't think anybody who looks at the Libertarian Party today. Well, first, let me address what you said, Pete, because I think what you said was powerful. Like all politics is local. But I think that if anything, the Free State Project and some of the other things we've seen locally is that really the best you're going to be able to do, even locally, is to tinker around the edges. You might be able to change a little bit here, change it a little bit there, but there's no evidence at all that the philosophy that we espouse has any sort of like really gripping, has any teeth to it, that you could make any real gigantic lasting change to a state or to a city. And if anybody who looks at the Libertarian Party leadership right now, anybody who says that those guys won't be as big a tyrants as the people we have in now if you elect libertarian politicians is kidding themselves. They're absolutely, they're no different than who we have now. They're all politically motivated, and as you said, what are you going to do? The most you're going to be able to do is now violate your own principles in an attempt to build the sort of world that you want to build. And so I thank you for saying that too, by the way, Buck. I feel like I've been a little bit ahead of this, and all I can do is just follow what I think is right. And if people don't think it's a good idea or they think I'm stupid, I'm not knocking anybody, by the way, but I can tell you right now that I don't think most libertarians really want liberty. I really don't. And what I mean by that is liberty requires personal responsibility and risk. Yeah. Two things that most people are not willing to take. They'll sit around and complain. They'll sit around and try and one up each other and be each other's intellectual and moral superiors. But if you ask them to actually get out there and take some personal responsibility to change their own lives, most of them will turn their nose up at that, and they'll come up with 1,000 different excuses why. And I think at the end of the day, what they're really saying is, if I just point the blame at somebody else, if I just point it at government or my own political party or something else, then I absolve myself of the responsibility of taking personal responsibility for where I am and my status in life. And I decided a long time ago that wasn't going to be me, that I was, and whether it's true or not, I stand by this idea that if one can do it, so can many, so can I. And I look around and I see people every single day. We have 1,700 new millionaires every day in this country. That's new money millionaires in this country. And I can tell you right now, all you got to do is look at every totalitarian regime, every cult that's ever existed, and the very first thing that they do is come for your money. The very first thing, a cult will strip you of your money. They'll make you turn over all of your possessions. The government that wants to control you will control your wealth first, because wealth is power. Wealth is freedom. Wealth is liberty. And all I'm saying, I'm not saying everybody's got to go out there and get stupid, filthy rich. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is the more wealth you can accumulate and the more income mobility you have, the greater your liberty, the greater your freedom. And that's stuff that you can control. And so if you want to sit around and talk about politics, then, first of all, it's a fool's errand, because the Libertarian Party's been trying for 40 years and they haven't been able to make any headway at all. And secondly, that to me is a cop-out. It's a cop-out that says, I don't want to do anything myself. I just want to complain about how little others are doing to support me and my ideas and my liberty. And I just decided several years ago that I didn't want to be around anybody that had that mentality. I wanted a mentality of people, and I wanted to surround myself with people that were doers, not talkers, and people who are actively working to create that sort of freedom in their own lives. And I've been lucky enough that it's taken a little bit of time, but now I think after COVID hit, everybody else is kind of like starting to say the same thing. And I just feel blessed that we can now have conversations like this with guys like Pete and some of the other really big names in our industry who are voices in our industry who are really coming around and saying, hey, I think this would be a good idea. I'm not saying that you have to ignore politics altogether. I'm just saying that's not the way out. That's not the way to what we want.
Talk about, I want to merge a few things here. I want to talk about the kind of project that you've been working on, Jason, and then the discussion, you guys discussed it briefly when Pete had you on, Jason, The Fourth Turning, because that book has kind of made a resurgence as of late. I actually got it because I saw Steve Bannon talking about it, and he's quite into it. And it does seem, if that book is correct, and it has been pretty correct thus far, that we are entering a different cycle now. And I've heard you kind of relate this project you're doing to possibly this new cycle we're entering into. So I'd like you to talk about that.
Okay, I'll be brief with it. So in the book, The Fourth Turning, the two historians that wrote it talk about cycles that happen throughout history, and they look specifically at American history. And what they found is that there are four basic turnings that happen over the course of a period of years. And we have been in what's been known as the third turning, and now we're into the fourth turning. And the fourth turning is a period of unrest, of instability. The last time that we were in a fourth turning was World War II. And we are back into it now. And this is a time when in the third turning, which is where we came out of in the 80s and 90s, there's a very individualistic mindset. One that it was the greed is good era. It was the maverick taking to the skies in the military and breaking all the rules, and everybody loved him, right? It was do your thing, thumb your nose at authority. Everybody loved that. Well, as we move into the fourth turning, what we tend to see is a move away from individualism, more to collectivism. And when we reach the first turning, which we should come into if the books are right, somewhere around 2028 or something, or 2025. They're not exact, so we just kind of guessing at this where we are now, and when we move into the next one, we will have a society that is much more predisposed to. If you don't like the term collectivism, which I really don't, use the term community, much more community centric rather than individualistic centric. So the best time for libertarians would have been from about 1985 to about 2000. And now moving into the next 20 or 30 years is going to be some of the worst time for the ideas of individual liberty, because it's going to be unpalatable if you follow the book to the people who are coming up. And you kind of see that in kind of the cancel culture that we've been in for roughly the last 10 years or so. So cancel culture got started in the halls of academia with a bunch of young 20-somethings who looked at the world around them, ravaged by war and individualism, and turned their nose up at it. And they showed their distaste for this kind of like rough, gruff individualism by trying to silence everybody that disagreed with them, or everybody that they thought was hate speech and wasn't friendly and kind and gentle. Now, the reason that happened, I think, is because 20-somethings in college lack they lack the emotional intelligence and the life experience to really act out what they're feeling. But I think as these millennials move into their 30s and we see them come of age, that what you're going to see is the cancel culture as we understand it today will begin to temper itself. And it will result in what is really just more a community-centric sort of ideal that most people want to see. And I'm looking at that and saying, okay, I believe in these principles, although the way I talk about them has changed. My ideas and my principles have never changed. And I think that the most important thing that we can do is create individual liberty, because I think that enough people do that that will lead more opportunity for more people. But I'm saying we're not going to be able to communicate it the same way. We're not going to be able to communicate it the way we did in the 1990s or in the early 2000s, because people are not going to be receptive to that message. And so I said, how do I build a community of people who are all focused on individual liberty and economic freedom, but tell that story in a way that invites people into a community and talk about it in terms of a community? And so a year ago, I started a little community that we now call the Nomad Network. And early on, we funded it by having people pay a very small subscription fee of around $20 to come and be part of it. And it's really designed around liberty-minded people who want to build a digital business to create greater wealth and more income mobility. And it's a community where people can engage. We've got some training materials and stuff to help people kind of get the juices flowing and get their ideas off the ground. And then we have some other programs that I work with clients on where they've already got established businesses and they're trying to grow them, right? But the community itself is just a place for people to come together and support each other and help each other, because I believe that although we talk about individual liberty, no man's an island. It takes a lot of people in your life supporting you and helping you with resources and connections in order to create the kind of life that you want. And I'm really happy to announce that we're getting ready to launch our new mobile app. I think it's coming next month, and it'll have a free version. So people will be able to come and network on the app and be part of our community without having to spend any money. So even if you're not in a place where you want to start a business or you want to grow something like that, as long as you're predisposed to the idea that we need to control our income and build community and create mobile income, it's going to be a place for you. And I'm very, very, very excited about it, because I think it's a community that can help last. I have a plan later on, and I know I'm kind of rambling here, but my ultimate goal is that the community will become a will become a revenue source for its members. So my ultimate goal is that we will take the blockchain and the new crypto technology that's coming out, and we'll create what's a form of a collective or a cooperative, where a portion of the revenue that the app generates and the money that's generated from the app will end up being redistributed to the members who are very active, who are engaging, who are bringing other members on, so that you can be paid for the quality of the content that you're distributing on our app. That's a really big vision, and I have no idea how we're going to get it all done. But that's a blending of what I think that's what I'm talking about when I say collectivism and individual liberty. Mm-hmm. It's like we're coming together as a community, and we are incentivizing people through the power of capitalism to create great content so we can grow the community, and we want to pay people for that and have them be partners in what we're building. And I think that's an amazing blend of those two things that's going to attract a lot of people.
Is there a geographic component to what you're discussing, or is it all strictly online?
Again, that's a great question. What we want, on the new app, we're going to have the ability to set up as many groups as we want to. So my vision long term for the groups is that they will be both topical and also location driven, so that we will not only you might meet on the app, but then you can line up with a group, say in Scottsdale, where I'm moving to, or in Maine, wherever, in Tulsa. And you can get together with other members in that area who are on the app, and you guys can do local meetups and support each other that way as well. Businesses can come together and support each other. I really want it to be broad. We start out narrow, of course, because you start out in a niche, but my vision for it is that it will grow into something that doesn't just happen online, but also facilitates offline interaction as well.
This ad is for all of the single men and women that listen to Counterflow. I've finally got a dating app that's really worth it, because I've got single friends. They show me these dating apps. There's a bunch of swiping left and swiping right, and then you end up going out with some hardcore leftist that's insane, and the date sucks, and you go nowhere, and it seems to be a giant waste of time. Well, that's why I have for you Drom, D-R-O-M. Above the O is the little umlaut. It's a Swedish word. Drom dating app is a values-based matching app. So if you're libertarian or conservative, if you've got lifestyle that's important to you, religion that's important to you, how to raise your children, if you want to homeschool, all of this stuff, you can now match up with someone who agrees with you. You can set your own deal makers and deal breakers. You could put in there, only show me people that are libertarian who want kids that want to homeschool them, something like that. Drom is a free new values-based dating app. So like I said, you pick the deal breaker, you pick the deal maker, and it will find you like-minded people that care about the same core values. It could be local or anywhere in the world. And check this out, this part's key in my opinion. It's video only. It's video profiles and video chats, no pictures, no texts. This creates a more human type vibe and reduces, let's say, the catfishing. I know some of you people out there have been victim to certain angles when you see a picture and you think, well, this should be a great date, and then you see them in person and it's like, wow, what angles were you fooling me with? This is all video, so there is no fooling, there is no catfishing. If you both like each other's video profiles, then you start video chatting. Once you're both ready to go on the date, Drom actually has a date planner to make the date planning easy. It lets you design your perfect match. There are no experts, match percentages, nothing like that. You pick exactly what you want. You only get those matches. If you don't find a deal breaker or deal maker that's important to you, you can actually add your own if there's not one in the selections they give you. So, guys, girls that listen to Counterflow, this is what you do. Go in your browser and type in drom.date/buck. That's Drom, DROM.date/buck. Click the Apple or Android button and use the invite code BUCK to sign up. And good luck out there. Let me know how this works for you guys. I'm really excited to pitch this product. Let's get back to the show. Pete, I've heard you talk about, I believe you took part in some of the Freedom Cell network stuff that John Bush does, and I think you had a grouping back before you moved. Can you talk about that and for people that aren't familiar with it, kind of what it entails? And I assume you'll be able to have a new group where you're at now?
Sure. John came up with this idea of he's basically starting a website so that people could network. And the idea of putting together a freedom cell was, I call it like mutual aid, just a mutual aid society. And really what it is when if all else fails, if things get really bad, you can, if one person, if they're coming after one person, you can support the other the other people can support them. If it's a collective thing, then you come together collectively. And I think that's I remember as a joke a couple of years ago, I put out like this meme, and I think it was something like yada yada yada, anarchists unite. And you could just tell by the response that, anarchists unite. That's hilarious. And and it is when you think about it, because the reason why most anarchists are online is because they don't want to deal with other people. So the Freedom Cell thing was just awesome. We had one in Atlanta that was phenomenal, and everybody came together. It was really became family really quick. And John's whole idea of once it gets to 8 people is like enough. If it gets past 8 people, you got to break off and you have to start another one. And the things that we talked about, we talked about shooting, obviously, of course. We talked about prepping and keeping things stored, and talked about ham radios at one point, to just contact people under the radar. And yeah, I think it's a great idea. And like I said, if anyone who studied, we even did this in our documentary that's on Amazon Prime now, The Monopoly on Violence. We talked about how at one time, especially in the early 20th century, the average person had a healthcare plan, but it was through like a local mutual aid society. And when the government decided to get into the business of healthcare, we lost that, because whenever the government decides to do something that the private sector has done before, the overwhelming majority of people, seeing the government as legitimate, flock to it. And I just like that model. I like the model of coming together to do things like that. Although it does seem to be on the surface at odds with what Jason's talking about, where you're talking about building personal wealth. But when it comes down to it, how do you build personal wealth? You do it by serving other people, unless you're getting government contracts. Somebody asked on Twitter yesterday, they said, if someone wanted to become a billionaire, what's the easiest way to do it? And I just said, government contracts. It's really in this world, at this point, how else are you going to do it? But I don't think the idea of building personal wealth, and I like the way Jason defined wealth on my when I interviewed him for my show, was it's not really about just having this unbelievable amount of money, cryptocurrency, gold, silver set aside. It is being able to control your destiny outside of the system where no one else controls you. And Jason, you can correct me if I'm getting that wrong. But I think that that's something that has to be looked at when you see that in the last 18 months, government has declared war on small businesses. There's no way to trust the system now the way it is. And really, if you want to there's no guarantees in life, but if you want to have your best shot, it is to build something outside of the system and build something for yourself. And if you're going to build something in the system, build something outside of the system as well. Have something, it's like the shade tree mechanic. Most of them, half of the mechanics I've known in my life made more money off the books than they did at work. So, there's your perfect example of what I would talk about if I was talking about making money outside of the system and building something outside of the system, building wealth.
Jason, I want to ask you kind of a relationship type question, because not you personally, but the people that are having, let's say, business partners or friends in kind of their acquaintance group or friends at work, or even, unfortunately, it seems to be family members. It seems to be there's like a fault line being that's happening right now. And it's right now, I guess maybe it's vax versus unvax, although in all fairness, the people that are it's not just they're all bad, they're all good, but the ones that are wanting everyone to get what they want, basically. In other words, if you don't have the vaccine, I don't want you near me. If you don't believe XYZ, this means you want people to die. That's unfortunately becoming a hard reality with a lot of relationships. And what's your advice on people dealing with that sort of issue? Because my advice so far to people has been, look, if they're going to treat you like that, that's on them, not you. And it kind of shows you maybe a side of the person that you should have seen a long time ago. But I'd like your thoughts on that.
Well, I think that so if somebody says you're not vaccinated and I don't want to be around you because you're not, I
Yes.
think my response to that would be like, okay, all right, well, when you're over that, come let me know. If they decide to completely turn on you and attack you and call you names like an anti-vaxxer and tell you that you want people to die, that goes to a deeper psychosis, and you ought to question whether or not you should still be friends with that person or not. I'll stay away from like relationships and business partnerships because those are a little bit more difficult, especially if you're married, to navigate that stuff. But I'm like, okay, if you don't want me around, hey, when the phone's not ringing, that's me not calling. So that's fine. I'll respect your wishes. And I think that that's important. I think that, I know at some point you have to have the conversation as a libertarian and say, okay, what responsibility do I have to my neighbor if there's a chance that I might get somebody sick for me to take precautions because of my choices not to get vaccinated or whatever. Now, a lot of people say, well, vaccines don't work. They're not vaccines. There's no point in getting them. I would agree with you. I mean, the evidence supports that right now. But what I would say is that, hey, we do have, it's not all about you. There is a responsibility that if you're walking around with the flu, that you not go to work so you infect
Yes.
everybody else in there. So
Yeah.
if you know that you're sick,
Yes.
the right decision is not to go licking doorknobs and coughing in people's faces. That's a violation of everything that we stand for. And the flip side, so my position is just, dude, make your own decision. Make your own decision, and as long as you're not preventing me from living my life and making my decisions, then we're going to be fine. I think where you have a problem is when you go one step further and you say, oh, well, now that you've decided not to, now we're going to prevent you from engaging in society. That's a much deeper problem that we're facing now. And I'm just crossing my fingers that it doesn't get any worse. If it does, I'm just going to leave the country altogether. And I'll go find myself a little corner of the world where nobody cares about it, and I'll live my life down there. But I want to go back to something that Pete said, because Pete, I don't think we're at odds at all. You talked about the kind of the collective sort of groups that you've been starting. That's one of the big things that I want to create and facilitate. Not every transaction has to be monetary. I know for a fact that when I do for others without an expectation in return, that there's a tight bond that gets formed there. And that's a big part of having a community of people, of like-minded people who will support you, of a broad and diverse background and broad skill set, is that it doesn't always have to be monetary. It can just be, hey, man, you need help. I got a skill. Let me help you out. No, don't worry about it. I know we'll be fine. I don't need any money for that. That's something that I think we need more of in our community, and more in our nation as a whole. So I don't think we're far off at all. I think we're saying exactly the same thing. And like I said, I just couldn't be more excited, because I want more people to kind of grab hold of this and start coming up with ideas. How do we build what we want? How do we create the freedom through technology and through community that are going to that are going to do it for ourselves? What do we need to create or build today that's going to facilitate that? And I believe that the crux of it is going to come from some sort of decentralized exchange, some blockchain technology that's ultimately going to kill this stuff off. But we'll see. There's always going to be people who try and knock you down if you get too big, and there will always be people who want to amass wealth and power so that they can control others. I want as many good and honest people to get wealth and power who do not want to control others, who do it so that they can maintain their own freedom. And I think that's what we all stand for. So,
do you think that decentralization, as far as getting out, I mean, you're kind of doing it, getting out of big cities and going to smaller areas, is kind of the most hopeful and white pilling route for people like us?
maybe, Pete said another thing, and you didn't get it wrong, Pete. You got it exactly right. Is that having wealth and income mobility doesn't mean that you have to have millions and millions of dollars in the bank. It has to do with lifestyle. So Pete just moved into the middle of nowhere, kind of like semi off the grid, because he doesn't want to be. I don't want it to deal with the headache of being in the city and all that goes along with that. Hey, if you're living a modest life and what you really want to do is live in the hills of Tennessee and not be bothered, you don't need nearly as much wealth to maintain that freedom and liberty as if you wanted to fly around on G5 jets and drive Ferraris, right? The important thing is that you have the ability to move. See, for freedom to exist, it requires mobility and opportunity. If you have no mobility or no means to be mobile, so, I can travel anywhere I want to in the world. Well, I don't have any money. Well, it doesn't matter how free you are in terms of mobility if you have no wealth. And so mobility is a really key factor to that. And so for me, it's about, where do I want to spend time? I would really love to winter in Scottsdale and summer in Southern California. I just don't want to pay the summer taxes. So that's what I'm going to do. I mean, I'll go back to California and we'll go down to Manhattan Beach or somewhere like that for 2 or 3 months out of the year while it's 115 degrees in Scottsdale, and then we'll come back when the weather's beautiful. It's just like, there's such a pressure valve that gets released when the bills are paid, there's a little money in the bank, and that nobody can get in your way. It's just like, you can't. FU. We talked about FU money on Pete's show. It's just like, FU money is being able to look at somebody and say, you don't get to control me, you don't get to own me, you don't get to tell me what I can and cannot do. I'm too powerful in my own right to allow you to do that. Most people in this world will never experience that, not because they can't, but because they'll choose not to through their actions. I happen to believe, and Pete said this at the top of the show, he said, very few people will be able to do that. He's right, but it's not because they can't. It's because they won't do what's necessary to have it.
Yeah, well put. I'll be respectful with y'all's time. I want to get you out of here. Pete, I'd like you to not only talk about what you've been doing with the show and make that announcement that I've already heard you make, but just for my audience as well, I think it's quite good news. And say anything you want to people listening who think the noose is tightening just a bit. Anything you'd like to say to them, Pete, and then we'll get to you, Jason.
Well, I mean, I think the noose is tightening. I mean, it's obvious. And a lot of people have explanations for it. A dying animal lashing out. I think personally, they know that the system is falling apart and they've been looting it for about 20 years now. I mean, it's pretty obvious, especially since like 2007, 2008. You just see all these bailouts, these major, this is just a looting. And that money is making it back into the politicians' pockets. And I don't know what they're doing with it. I mean, if they're smart, they're putting it into cryptocurrency or gold or land or something like that, because if they're just holding on to that, it's going to be worthless at some point. But through the generosity of the people who listened to me, I was able to quit a job that I had that I actually was with a really good company, a really big company. And I was actually shocked when I got the job. I couldn't believe it, because it was like I wasn't even. I had been a full-time agorist for like 5 years before then, working off the books completely and doing some things that may not be within the law at some points, and not hurting anybody, but maybe some copyright infringements here and there. But but
just a little bit,
just a little. But yeah, I was able to quit that job and do this full time. And now that I am settled where I want to be, where I feel most comfortable, where I feel safe. And that's what I feel safe from, not only government. I feel safer from government where I am, but safer from people. The people around me are not people in Atlanta. People in Atlanta are insane. I mean, I watch people tweet from Atlanta, and I'm just like, well, they may as well be in like the Lower East Side of Manhattan. They have the same opinions as the people there. And I just want to say to the people who, donate to me and support me, thank you for allowing me to do this. And I am not going to let up. I mean, I'm going to put out way more content. I haven't been putting out as much content, especially writing, because a lot of people in the last year have really concentrated on my Substack, and they really look forward to my Substacks, because that's where I can say the things that I can't. That's where a lot of the non-libertarian stuff comes out, where I'm just really speaking my mind and being as raw as possible. But yeah, I mean, thank you. And as rotten as this sounds, I mean, really, COVID woke me up. This whole, how the government reacted to this really woke me up to the fact that I was just being another one of those people who was reading libertarian literature and living in Ancapistan in my head and attacking anyone who didn't have a perfect opinion that matched Murray Rothbard. And yeah, I think that's all bullshit. And we're living in a real world where people are dying from a very real virus that I had. I still cannot taste and smell anything. So don't fucking tell me that it doesn't exist, you piece of shit libertarians who feel like you have to be, you have to disagree with everything, and you have to be just edgelords. I mean, and this is coming from an edgelord. Stop being that edgelord. Thankfully, this happened and I could wake up. It woke me up, and I think it woke a lot of other people up. And the message that I started preaching in February of last year, I know people have told me that it's helped them to get through this. I've had people contact me and tell me they were ready to fucking end it. And because of the messages that I was saying, and people like Buck have been saying through this whole thing, it's helping them to get through. And I think I'm not going to stop. I'm going to just keep ramping it up until we're going to defeat these people. We're going to defeat these people because they can't win. They're too insane. They're too insane. We're too smart. We're going to do it. There's no fucking way we're not going to.
Well put. Jason, for the people that are wondering where they can see the light in all of this darkness, give them some inspiration on our way out of here.
Well, I think that I do see a lot of opportunity moving forward, as I said at the top of the show, and I'm grateful for the conversations. I think that the more conversations we have like this, and the more we talk about this, the more people will come around. The voices sitting around the table tonight are thought leaders. They have large audiences of people who are following them. They have the ability to reframe positions and ideas and to help set the tone for the next decade. We are the ones who are in a position to set our own destiny and to decide what kind of men and women we're going to be moving forward. And I think that these are the kind of conversations that we need to have, where we're not slinging mud and we're not yelling and screaming about others. We're just really looking internally and saying, what can we do? Really, what can we do? What actions can we take today? And to Pete's great credit and to the people who've supported him, he now has that lifestyle, and I think anybody can have it. I'm more optimistic than I am pessimistic. And I think that if you and I and everybody listening here will just take a real hard and honest look at themselves and their lives and say, hey, what community can I get involved with? And who can I be part of? And who can help me? And who can I help to create this in our lives. Just that gentle shift in the focus can mean the world of difference. It can change everything. And I'm excited to be having the conversation and really appreciate you having me on, man.
Yeah, and where can people find your stuff, and including that app you were talking about, the Nomad thing?
Yeah, so if you guys go to the website, jasonstapleton.com, you will see on the main page there's a link to go and join the Nomad Network. Now, right now, we don't have the free version, but what I will do is I'll give you a free month. So you can come and try it free for a month, and by the time that month is over, we should be allowing people to get onto the new app. That's assuming that Apple and all these app people don't have any big problems with what we've designed and put up. But we're giving ourselves enough leeway that it should be all right. It's called the Nomad Network. It's at jasonstapleton.com, right on the main page. Just scroll down about halfway and click on the link, and it'll take you to a little page where you can see all about it. And just come and see. That's all I'm asking, is just come and see and be part of it. If it ain't for you, that's fine, but it's only going to get better. We have several hundred people on the platform right now, and it's becoming a really active community, and it's only going to get better when people get to start inviting their friends and coming on. So if you want to support us early on in that, I would just be ecstatic to have you part of that group.
Pete, plug away. Where can they find your stuff?
Freeman Beyond the Wall podcast. Substack is by any means necessary, petequiñones.substack.com. And if you, myself and a couple of friends of mine made a documentary on like the history of anarchism, and it's on Amazon Prime. It's called The Monopoly on Violence. I don't really see anarchism happening for a while, but there are some really, really good ideas in there presented of ways that we can live freer now. There's a section on agorism in there. There's a section on mutual aid societies in there, and go check it out. I mean, it was meant for everyone in this vast community we have to something for everyone. And but freemanbeyondthewall.com, that's my podcast, and that's how people have gotten to know me.
Excellent. Thank you guys so much, Peter Quiñones, Jason Stapleton. Thank you for being here. Love it.
Thanks, Bob.
Yes, sir. All right. I hope you guys are feeling a bit more white-pilled after that discussion with Pete Quiñones and Jason Stapleton. Man, that was excellent. I really enjoyed all of it. Hope you guys did too. This has been a bonus episode. I won't rant at the end like I do on all this stuff, but you know where to find everything. Counterflowpodcast.com. It's got all my social media links. You can find me through the website, and let's just leave it at that. Oh, also, let me tell you, the YouTube page. I got to keep pimping out the YouTube page because this bonus episode will be up on there. If you want to see the beautiful faces of Peter Quiñones and Jason Stapleton and myself, you can find it on the YouTube page, Counterflow with Buck Johnson. This episode will be on there as well. And I was happy to do this. I hope it worked for you guys, and it was therapeutic for me. And until next time, have a great week.
You get split in fucking half, but I call him the hologram brass. But I am the center inside the placenta of math. You clash with cyanide gas and die fast. Rhythmical equivalent of solids, liquid, and gas. We smash your sinus with the power of Lord Titus. But I am the virus inside of the iris of Cyrus.
Like the sound of the Counterflow podcast? Our audio production is provided by Podsworth Media. Check them out at podsworth.com.
This has been the Counterflow Podcast, a part of the Renegade Media Network.